Hello, my name is Tyler Walker. I am 35 years old and currently the CEO of an electronics manufacturing company. I live in Newark, New Jersey, a vibrant industrial city where bustling streets blend with the hum of factories, the scent of smoke and dust, and the pulse of big dreams. Newark isn't as glamorous as New York, but it has its own unique character. Resilience, perseverance, much like myself, or at least like the person I used to be. I want to share my story with you, not to boast or complain, but because I believe that sometimes the deepest wounds teach us how to rise the strongest. This story begins 13 years ago, when I was just a 22-year-old full of ambition but also brimming with the kind of naivety that, looking back now, makes me shake my head with a bittersweet smile. Back then, I was the eldest son of the Walker family. Not wealthy, but not poor either. My father, Glenn Walker, was the owner of Walker Tech, a company that manufactured electronic components and circuit boards. It sounds impressive, but at the time, Walker Tech was just a small workshop tucked among the aging industrial complexes on the outskirts of Newark. Its weathered cement walls, clattering production lines that seemed on the verge of breaking down, and the smell of machine oil mixed with sweat. All of it is etched deeply into my memory. I remember when I was a child, my father would take me to the workshop. He'd point at each machine, each circuit board, and say, "Tyler, this is the Walker family legacy. One day you'll take it over." I believed him, with all the innocence of a child's heart. I admired my father, a tall, confident man with a warm, resonant voice, who seemed to hold the entire world in the palm of his hand. I wanted to be like him, to prove I was worthy of being the eldest son, the one to carry on that legacy. But when I was 22, everything changed. Walker Tech was on the brink of bankruptcy. Major contracts were disappearing, clients were turning away, and competitors were stronger than ever. My father, who had always seemed invincible to me, began to grow irritable and distant. He would sit alone in his office, staring at stacks of unpaid bills, sighing heavily. My mother, Evelyn, would quietly prepare dinner as if trying to avoid facing reality. My younger siblings, Jason, then 15, who buried himself in video games, and Olivia, 12, who spent her days dreaming of becoming a star, seemed oblivious to what was happening. I had just graduated from college and was pursuing a master's degree in electrical engineering at MIT. It was my greatest dream, to become an engineer, an innovator, someone who could create technologies that would change the world. But one evening, my father called me home. He sat in the living room next to a half-empty glass of whiskey and said, "Tyler, the company is dying. If you don't help, it's all over." His voice, once so strong, trembled with something close to desperation. I didn't hesitate. I dropped out of graduate school, abandoning my own dreams, and returned to Newark. I told myself, this is family. This is responsibility. But deep down, I knew I was doing it because I wanted my father to be proud of me. I wanted him to look at me the way he looked at his beloved circuit boards, as something worth cherishing. The years that followed were an endless blur of long days. I threw myself into work like a man possessed. I stayed up all night, researching new technologies, finding ways to improve the production line. I remember those exhausting mornings when the dawn light streamed through the workshop windows, and I was still there, sketching circuit diagrams, calculating costs down to the penny. I proposed automating parts of the production line to my father, but he always dismissed it. "Too risky, Tyler. We don't have the money to experiment." But I didn't give up. I found ways to secure loans, persuaded small investors, and step by step, I turned my ideas into reality. Some nights I lay on the old sofa in the office, staring at the stained ceiling, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Once, an old employee, Henry, who had been with Walker Tech since my grandfather's time, patted my shoulder and said, "You're saving a legacy, Tyler. Your father is lucky to have you." His words were like a shot of adrenaline, pushing me to keep going. I wasn't just doing this for my father, but for people like Henry, for the families who depended on this workshop to survive. Slowly, the company began to recover. We secured a contract with a major corporation in California and expanded to other states. I improved our circuit boards, reducing production costs without sacrificing quality. Walker Tech was no longer a forgotten name. The press started noticing us, calling us an emerging star in the electronics industry. By the time I was 28, the company was valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. I remember the day a technology magazine published an article about me, calling me the young mastermind behind Walker Tech's revival. I cut out the article and taped it to the office wall, not out of pride, but as a reminder that every effort was worth it. But then one autumn afternoon, as golden leaves blanketed the streets of Newark, everything came crashing down. My father called me to a meeting at the main office. I walked in expecting a routine discussion about expansion plans. But when I sat down, my father, his face cold and expressionless, said something I'll never forget. "Tyler, the company has been sold." I thought I'd misheard. Sold? To who? When? I asked, my voice faltering. He looked at me, devoid of emotion, and replied, "A foreign investment group. The deal was finalized last week. It's done." It felt like the blood in my veins turned to ice. "You didn't ask me, not even once?" I was on the verge of breaking down. My father merely shrugged as if it didn't matter. "This was my decision, Tyler. You're just an employee." Those words cut through me like a knife. An employee? Me, the one who had dropped out of school, who had poured sweat and blood into saving this company, was just an employee? I wanted to stand up, to scream at him, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. I just sat there, staring at the man I had once admired, now a stranger. I left the office, my mind reeling. I drove aimlessly around Newark, through familiar streets, past the workshop where I had spent my youth building something I believed in. I stopped in front of the factory gate, staring at the Walker Tech sign glinting in the sunset. I asked myself, what did I do wrong? Why did my father do this? I had sacrificed everything, my dreams, my time, my youth, only to be betrayed like this. But little did I know, this was just the beginning of the coldness and cruelty my father would show me. And soon, a shocking truth, one hidden for decades, was about to be revealed. The shock of my father selling Walker Tech without so much as consulting me left me reeling. In the days that followed, I was like a ghost. I drove through the familiar streets of Newark, but everything now seemed cloaked in a different hue. Gray, cold, as if the city itself had turned its back on me. I couldn't sleep. Each night I lay on the creaky bed in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I had done wrong. The circuit boards I had designed, the sleepless nights spent saving the company, the dreams I had set aside, all of it now felt like a pile of ashes. I thought the betrayal from my father was the worst thing that could happen. But no, the real devastation was waiting for me at a family meeting I would never forget. The meeting took place on a Saturday evening at the large Walker family home on the outskirts of Newark. That house had once been the backdrop of my childhood, where I played with Jason and Olivia, where my mother used to sing lullabies when I was little, and where my father told me stories about the Walker family legacy. But that day, as I stepped through the heavy oak door, I sensed an eerie atmosphere. There was no laughter, no smell of the cookies my mother used to bake. Only a heavy silence hung in the air, as if the house itself was holding its breath. My mother, Evelyn, sat at the head of the dining table, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes fixed downward. My father, Glenn, sat across from her, a glass of whiskey in hand, a constant presence in these important moments. Jason, my 25-year-old brother with his disheveled hair and crumpled designer t-shirt, slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression. Olivia, my 22-year-old sister, now a hot influencer with millions of followers, was adjusting her glossy blonde hair, her eyes flicking over me as if I were a stranger. No one greeted me. No one held my gaze for more than a few seconds. I sat down, trying to stay calm. "What's this about, Dad?" I asked, my voice steady but burning with an inner fire. My father took a sip of whiskey, set the glass down with a sharp clink against the wooden table, and looked at me with the same cold eyes he had the day he announced the sale of the company. "Tyler," he said, "I've decided how to divide the money from the sale of Walker Tech." My heart tightened. I hadn't thought about claiming any share of the money, but deep down, I hoped my father would acknowledge what I had done for the company over the past 10 years. I had saved it from bankruptcy. I had elevated it to new heights. I had poured my entire youth into it, turning down lucrative job offers to dedicate myself to the family business. Surely my father saw that, didn't he? But reality hit me like a bucket of ice water. The old wound hadn't even begun to heal before a new one tore through me. "I'll keep 50%. The rest will be split evenly between Jason and Olivia," my father said, his voice flat like he was reading a memo. "As for you, Tyler, you don't need any. You're capable. You'll manage on your own." Each word felt like a hammer striking my skull. A third? Jason, the brother who only spent money on cars, parties, and lavish vacations? Olivia, the sister who lived for selfies, social media posts, and her virtual world? They who had never lifted a finger to save Walker Tech were getting a share, and I, who had sacrificed everything, got nothing? I looked at my father, hoping he'd say something more, a reason, an apology, anything. But he just took another sip of whiskey as if everything was perfectly clear. I turned to Jason. "What do you think about this?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Jason shrugged, not even looking up from his phone. "You're always so full of yourself, Tyler. You think you're some kind of hero, but the company was Dad's, not yours. I need the money to live. You clearly don't." My face burned with rage. "Jason, have you ever even set foot in the workshop? Do you have any idea what I went through to save the company?" I was almost shouting. Olivia let out a sharp, cutting laugh like a knife slicing through the air. "Oh, come on, Tyler, don't be so dramatic. You're always so serious, always going on about saving the company, the legacy." "Relax. You're so capable. Go make your own money. Don't be jealous of us." I turned to my mother, who had been silent the entire time. "Mom," I said, my voice hoarse, "do you think this is fair? Don't you have anything to say?" My mother looked up, her eyes red and teary, but she said nothing. She just shook her head slightly, as if begging me not to press further. Her silence was another knife slicing deep into my heart. I had hoped she would stand up for me, say something to defend me the way she used to hold me when I was a child. But no, she just sat there, powerless and distant. I shot to my feet, the wooden chair screeching against the floor. "Dad," I said, staring straight at Glenn, "why? I did everything for this family, for this company. Why are you treating me like this?" My father set his whiskey glass down, harder this time, the sound ringing like a warning. He stood up, tall and imposing, just as he had been when I was a child, when his presence alone commanded my awe. But this time his eyes weren't just cold, they were filled with contempt. "Tyler," he said, his voice slow, each word carved to wound, "I've treated you better than you deserve. Do you know why? Because you're not my son." Time seemed to stop. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, but every other sound, the hum of cars outside, Olivia's muttering, Jason's snicker, faded away. I stared at my father, searching for a hint that he was joking, that this was some sick prank. But his face was stone, unwavering. "What?" I whispered, my voice so weak I barely recognized it. "You heard me," he continued, his tone now laced with a cruelty I'd never seen before. "You're your mother's bastard. Evelyn had you before she married me. I raised you, gave you the Walker name, but you're not my blood. Jason and Olivia are my real children. That's why the money is theirs, not yours." I turned to my mother, desperate for her to deny it, to scream that he was lying. But she only bowed her head, her trembling hands clutching the edge of the table. Her silence was the most painful confirmation of all. It was true. It felt like the world collapsed beneath my feet. Not only had the company, my life's work, been taken from me, but my identity, the years I believed I was part of this family, vanished. I wasn't Glenn Walker's son. I wasn't part of the Walker legacy. Who was I? An outsider? A bastard, an employee, just as my father had said. I don't believe it, I muttered, but my voice faltered as if I didn't believe my own words. Mom, say something. Say it's not true. My mother looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but she remained silent. Her gaze, filled with pain and guilt, offered no explanation. I wanted to scream, to smash everything in that room, but I just stood there, frozen, like a man drained of all life. Jason burst into laughter, a cruel, mocking sound. God, Tyler, you're just figuring this out now. Turns out you're not the hero after all. Just a spare in this house. Pathetic. Olivia didn't laugh, but she looked at me with pity, like I was a stray dog. You should be grateful Dad raised you all these years, she said, her voice sugary but sharp. Don't make a scene, Tyler, just go. I don't remember how I left that house. All I know is that I drove aimlessly through the dark streets of Newark. Rain began to fall, the drops pelting the windshield, blurring everything in front of me. I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. The pain inside me was bigger than tears. It was like a black hole, swallowing every emotion, leaving only a cold void. I had lost the company, I had lost my family, and now I had lost myself. In the days that followed, I lived like a shadow. I didn't go to work, didn't answer my phone. My apartment became a cage where I trapped myself with questions that had no answers. Who was I? Why didn't my mother say anything? Why had my father, no Glenn, hidden the truth from me all these years? And why, after everything I had done, was I treated like an outsider? Each morning I woke to the faint sunlight filtering through the tattered curtains of my small Newark apartment. The steady hum of traffic outside seemed to remind me that the world was still moving, while I was not. I sat on the sofa staring at the pile of old Walker Tech papers and sketches I had brought home, now nothing more than meaningless fragments of memory. I tried to recall the excitement of designing circuits, of finding ways to improve the production line, but all that remained was a cold, empty void. I had lost the company, I had lost my family, and now I had lost myself. I wanted to call Emma, my fiancée, the one who had always been my light in the darkest days. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over her name in my contacts, but each time I went to press call, I stopped. How could I tell her that I was no longer the Tyler Walker she knew? How could I face her when I didn't even know who I was anymore? I feared Emma's gaze, gentle yet piercing, as if she could see through every pain I kept hidden. I was afraid she'd see me now as a failure, a man with nothing left to take pride in. But then on a rainy afternoon, as I sat watching raindrops streak down the window, my phone buzzed. Emma's name lit up the screen and my heart clenched. I hesitated but finally pressed accept, knowing I couldn't hide forever. Tyler? Her voice came through, gentle but firm, like a breeze clearing the fog in my mind. Are you okay? I've called you a few times and you haven't answered. I was silent for a moment, searching for words. I'm sorry, Emma, I haven't been okay lately. I know, she said, her voice soft but certain. I won't ask too much, Tyler, but this weekend come to my place, okay? My dad wants to meet you, it's important. I was surprised. Emma's father, Richard Bennett, was a man I deeply respected, but he rarely got involved in my affairs. What's it about? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. You'll see when you get here, Emma replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Will you come? I want to see you, Tyler. I miss you. Her words were like a balm, melting some of the ice in my heart. Yeah, I'll come, I said, though doubt and unease still churned inside me. Emma Bennett wasn't just my fiancée, she was the one person who made me feel like I could be myself. We met 3 years ago at a technology conference in New York. I was presenting a new circuit board I had designed for Walker Tech, and she, a financial analyst working for her father's company, was sitting in the front row scribbling notes with a focused expression. I remember her eyes, sharp yet warm, as if she could see straight into my soul. After the presentation, she approached me asking incisive questions about the technology, but then she smiled and said, "You talk about circuits like you're telling a love story, Tyler." I was captivated instantly. Emma was unlike any woman I'd ever met. She was intelligent, confident, but never arrogant. She had a way of putting people at ease while commanding respect. We started dating, and I quickly realized she wasn't just a partner but a true companion, the only person I could share everything with, from my wildest tech ideas to my deepest fears. Emma knew about my family, about the pressures I faced at Walker Tech. She would sit for hours listening to me talk about sleepless nights, arguments with my father, and the dreams I had set aside. She never judged, only listened, and sometimes she'd hold my hand and say, "Tyler, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're already incredible." But now, after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I was still incredible in her eyes. I feared that once she knew the truth, that I wasn't Glenn Walker's son, that I had lost everything, she'd see me differently. Still, I went, because Emma was the only thing I could hold on to. That weekend, I drove to Emma's house in Montclair, an upscale neighborhood not far from Newark. The Bennett family home sat at the end of a tree-lined street, its manicured lawn dotted with vibrant red roses blooming under the sunlight. The house exuded elegance yet warmth, with large windows gleaming and the faint scent of pine from the fireplace. As I walked through the gate, Emma was waiting, wearing a pale green dress, her brown hair loose, her smile radiant like the sun. "Tyler," she called, running to hug me. The warmth of her embrace made me want to cry, but I held it back, squeezing her hand gently. "Are you okay?" she asked, looking into my eyes. I knew she could see the pain I carried, but she didn't push me to talk. She just took my hand and led me inside. The dinner took place in the Bennett's elegant dining room. The table was set impeccably, with white linens, flickering candlelight, and the rich aroma of braised beef filling the air. Besides Emma and me, a few of her relatives were there, but the evening's focal point was Richard Bennett, Emma's father. A seasoned entrepreneur, he was the force behind Bennett Industries, a renowned investment conglomerate. In his 60s, he still commanded authority, with neatly combed silver hair, eagle-sharp eyes, and a smile that was both friendly and enigmatic. The meal passed with light conversation. Emma talked about her new financial project. Richard shared stories from his early entrepreneurial days, and I tried to smile to blend into the atmosphere, though my heart remained heavy. I ate without tasting, wishing the evening would end so I could retreat to my cage. But after the others left, Richard patted my shoulder. "Tyler, come to my study for a moment," he said, his voice low but undeniable. Emma gave me an encouraging smile, and I followed him, unsure of what awaited. Richard's study was a blend of timeless and modern. Tall oak bookshelves lined with books and documents reached the ceiling, contrasting with a tablet on the desk. A small fireplace crackled, casting a warm glow. He gestured for me to sit in a leather chair, poured 2 glasses of red wine, and handed me one. I held it but didn't drink, watching him, waiting. "Tyler," he began, sitting across from me, his eyes locking onto mine. "I know what you've been through. I know about the company, your family, and the truth Glenn Walker told you." I flinched, nearly dropping the glass. "You know?" I asked, my voice faltering. "How?" He smiled, not a triumphant smile, but one of understanding. "I've been in this game long enough to know things, Tyler. I have my people, and I keep an eye on talents like you. People with potential held back by those who don't deserve them." I stayed silent, unsure how to respond. Richard sipped his wine and continued, his voice slow but weighty. "I'm the one who bought Walker Tech. Through a subsidiary, but it was me behind the deal." My blood ran cold. "You?" I blurted, unable to believe my ears. "Why? Why did you do it?" He set his glass down, leaning forward, his gaze piercing. "To be honest, your father, Glenn Walker, is an incompetent man. He not only failed to preserve his legacy, but also failed to recognize talent. I'm not like him. I saw your potential, Tyler. I've followed you for a long time. From the articles about Walker Tech's revival, the circuits you designed, the way you turned a failing company into a rising star. You're not just an engineer, you're a leader. But Glenn never saw that. He didn't deserve you. My heart raced. His words were like a gust of wind stirring the ashes in my chest, igniting a small spark. But I was still wary. So why buy the company, just to help me? He chuckled softly, this time with genuine warmth. Not just for you, Tyler. It was a good deal, but I bought it because I knew you were the soul of Walker Tech. And I didn't want to see that soul buried. He stood, walked to the desk, and placed a folder in front of me. I want you back as CEO of Walker Tech, he said, his voice firm like a command. But this time, not as the boss's son, not as Glenn Walker's employee. You'll have real control. You'll lead the company your way. I believe you can do it. I stared at the folder, then at him. In that moment, it felt like the world was opening up before me. The painful days, the sleepless nights, my family's mockery, all seemed to fade, replaced by a glimmer of hope. I wasn't sure if I had the strength to start again, but Richard's gaze, his trust, made me want to try. Are you sure? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know if I'm strong enough. He placed a hand on my shoulder, firm and warm. Tyler, I don't choose people because they're perfect. I choose them because they have fire in their hearts, and you have that fire. Do you accept? I took a deep breath, feeling my own breath return after days of numbness. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in days, I felt alive. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I accept. He smiled, raising his glass. Then cheers. Welcome back. When I left Richard's study, Emma was waiting in the hallway. She didn't ask anything, just took my hand, her eyes saying everything. She believed in me. We stepped into the garden where moonlight bathed the roses, and for the first time in days, I felt I could breathe. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I had found my light. And this time, I wouldn't let it slip away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the haunting questions that had plagued me in the days before, but because of a new feeling, like a small flame flickering to life in my chest. I lay in bed watching the moonlight spill through the window of my small Newark apartment, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a failure. Richard's offer wasn't just a chance to return to work, it was an affirmation that I was worth something, that the years of sweat and blood I poured into Walker Tech weren't meaningless. I gripped my phone, wanting to call Emma to thank her, but then I smiled and decided to save it for the morning. I needed time to process everything, to believe I could start again. The next morning, I put on a suit I hadn't touched in ages, stood before the mirror, and tried to recognize the man staring back. My face was still me, tired eyes, slightly messy hair, but something was different. A spark of determination, a hint of pride. I took a deep breath and drove to the new headquarters of the company, now called Bennett Walker Industries. Stepping into the new building in downtown Newark, I barely recognized the place. The old Walker Tech, with its stained cement walls, clattering production lines, and the pungent smell of machine oil, was gone. In its place stood a modern structure with gleaming tempered glass, minimalist yet luxurious interiors, and open spaces flooded with light. The Bennett Walker Industries sign at the entrance shone brightly in the sunlight, a declaration of a new beginning. I was led to the CEO's office, a spacious room on the top floor with a panoramic view of Newark, a sleek ebony desk, a large screen displaying real-time data, and a bookshelf filled with volumes on technology and management. I stood at the window, looking out over the city, feeling as though I were standing on a mountaintop with the world waiting for me to conquer it. But I also felt the weight of expectation. Richard had placed his trust in me, and I couldn't let him down, or myself, not again. On my first day, I gathered the management team. Some were familiar faces from the Walker Tech days, like Hank, the veteran engineer who had once patted my shoulder and called me the company's hope. He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with pride, and said, I knew you'd be back, Tyler. This is where you belong. But there were also new faces brought in by Richard with sharp eyes and burning ambition. I knew I faced a daunting challenge, not just leading the company, but proving I deserved this role. I started by restructuring the entire operation. The old Walker Tech had performed well, but it was held back by the outdated mindset of my father, no, of Glenn. I wanted Bennett Walker Industries to be more than an electronics component manufacturer. I wanted it to lead the industry. I focused on two new areas: artificial intelligence, AI, and advanced microprocessors. These were the dreams I'd nurtured at MIT, ideas I'd once pitched to Glenn only to be dismissed with a shrug and, "Too risky, Tyler." Now with full control, I didn't need anyone's permission. I recruited top engineers from Silicon Valley, partnered with universities for AI research, and invested heavily in cutting-edge microprocessor production lines. I remember long nights working with the team, sketching designs on whiteboards, debating algorithms and testing new chip prototypes. Once a young engineer, Sarah, looked at me and said, "Boss, you work like the whole world depends on you." I laughed, but deep down I knew she wasn't wrong. This wasn't just a job. It was my chance to prove I wasn't the spare my family had called me. The first few months were far from easy. We faced countless issues: technical glitches in the new chip designs, skepticism from investors about my ambitious plans. Some days I felt drained, tempted to give up. But then I'd recall Richard's steady gaze, Emma's encouraging smile, and I pressed on. I wasn't working to prove anything to the Walker family anymore. I was working for myself. Within 2 years, Bennett Walker Industries had transformed. We launched the most advanced microprocessor line on the market, with performance surpassing our competitors. Our AI products, from automation software to intelligent management systems, were sought after by major corporations. A contract with a Japanese tech giant catapulted our name onto the global stage. The press began calling me the rebirth of American tech. A Forbes article wrote, "Tyler Walker, once a shadow under his father's feet, has become the standard bearer of America's tech industry." I clipped the article but didn't tape it to the wall like I used to. I tucked it in a drawer, a reminder of how far I'd come. Each morning, stepping into my office, I no longer felt like the trembling 22-year-old standing before Glenn. I was Tyler Walker, CEO of Bennett Walker Industries, in command, no longer anyone's shadow. Interviews with the media became part of my new life. I stood before cameras, answering questions about strategy, technology, and the future. But deep down, I knew I wasn't doing this for fame. I did it because I loved the work, the thrill of seeing my ideas come to life, the way we were changing how the world worked, one chip, one line of code at a time. Emma was always by my side. She wasn't just my fiancée, but my confidant, the one who reminded me to rest when I overworked, who laughed and said, "Tyler, you don't have to save the world in a single day." In the evenings when I came home, she'd sit with me, listening to my talk of new projects, and sometimes she'd just hold my hand, saying nothing, letting me know I wasn't alone. While I rebuilt my life, the Walker family, those who once called me spare, began to crumble. I didn't actively keep tabs on them, but Newark is a small city and news travels fast. Glenn, after selling Walker Tech, dove into a lavish lifestyle he thought he deserved. He bought a Lamborghini, a Miami mansion, and invested in high-risk business ventures. His fortune dwindled by the day. Jason, my brother, was even worse. He burned through his share of the money on gambling and parties. I heard he got caught up in sports betting, racked up debts, and was once beaten badly by loan sharks after crossing some gangsters. I didn't know how to feel: anger, pity, or just indifference. Olivia, my hot influencer sister, fared no better. She used her money to maintain her glamorous social media image, but then got entangled in a major scandal. A tabloid exposed that she'd evaded millions in taxes from her endorsement deals. Her online following turned on her, brands dropped her, and she became the target of vicious criticism. She tried to salvage her image with apology videos, but no one cared. The last I heard, she'd locked her social media accounts and vanished from Newark, her whereabouts unknown. My mother, Evelyn, broke my heart the most. She fell apart completely. I heard she rarely left the house, her health deteriorated, and she was frequently hospitalized for heart issues. An old neighbor once called me, saying she saw my mother sitting alone on the porch, staring into the distance as if waiting for something that would never come. I wanted to visit her, to ask why she stayed silent when I needed her most, but every time I thought about it, the image of her bowed head at that family meeting resurfaced, and I couldn't bring myself to go. The Walker family, once everything to me, was now in ruins. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel sorrow either. I only felt a strange detachment, as if they belonged to another life, another Tyler. I had once lived to please them, to prove I was worthy of being part of the family, but now I lived for myself. Each day at Bennett Walker Industries was proof of that. I led my team with a new conviction. I didn't need to be anyone's son, didn't need the Walker name, to create value. I was Tyler, and for the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. 3 years have passed since I first stepped into the office of Bennett Walker Industries as CEO, and my life has transformed completely. Each morning I wake to the brilliant sunlight streaming through the windows of my new apartment in downtown Newark, where I moved after the company began to thrive. I'm no longer the lost man trapped in a cage of pain and doubt. I am Tyler Walker, CEO of one of America's top 3 technology companies, hailed by the press as the tech rebirth. But more than that, I am a man who has reclaimed himself. Work consumes most of my time. Long days at the office, intense meetings with investors, late nights perfecting a new algorithm, all of it is a joy. I love how my team works, love the moments when a seemingly crazy idea becomes reality. Bennett Walker Industries is more than a company, it's my dream, built from the fragments of my past. Emma remains my light. We've planned our wedding for next fall, when the oak trees in Montclair turn a vibrant gold. I thought my life had found its rhythm, that the wounds from the Walker family had healed, though they left scars that would never fade. But then one day the past came knocking. That morning started like any other. I arrived at the office early, sitting before the large screen, reviewing reports on the new microprocessor line we were about to launch. The office buzzed with energy, the clatter of keyboards mingling with the laughter of engineers. I was approving a plan when my secretary, Lisa, knocked on the door. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice hesitant, "there's someone here to see you. She says she's your mother." My heart skipped a beat. My mother? Evelyn? I hadn't seen her since that fateful family meeting when she bowed her head, silent in the face of Glenn's cruel truth. I had tried to erase her from my mind, to forget her guilt-ridden eyes, but now she was here, in this building, where I had rebuilt my life. "Let her in," I said, my voice dry. Lisa nodded and left. I stood, adjusting my tie, trying to maintain composure. But inside, a storm was brewing. The door opened and Evelyn stepped in. She had aged far more than I expected since I last saw her. Her once dark hair was streaked with silver, her eyes weary, framed by deep wrinkles. She wore a thin coat, her trembling hands clutching an old handbag. Looking at her, I no longer saw the mother who sang lullabies to me as a child, but a broken woman, crushed by life. "Tyler," she said, her voice frail, almost a whisper. Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. I stood there looking at her, searching for some emotion, love, compassion, even anger. But all I felt was a cold emptiness. "Why are you here, Mom?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. Evelyn lowered her head, her hands tightening around her handbag. "Tyler, I know you're angry with me. I know I was wrong to stay silent, to let Glenn treat you that way. But I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to beg you." "Beg?" I repeated, feeling heat rise to my face. "Beg for what?" She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but her voice held steady. "Please help them. Glenn and your siblings. They're falling apart. Glenn has lost everything, his house, his money, his reputation." Jason's drowning in debt with nowhere to turn. Olivia. She disappeared after the scandal and no one knows where she is. I can't watch my family crumble like this. You're the only one who can save them. I froze. The mother who had stayed silent when I was erased from my life's work, who didn't utter a word when Glenn declared I wasn't his son, was now standing before me, begging me to save the people who betrayed me. I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat, leaving only a bitter taste. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with restraint, "do you remember that day? The day you sat silently while Glenn called me a spare? The day you didn't say a word to defend me, and now you want me to save them, after everything they did?" Evelyn broke down, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "I know I was wrong. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. But you're my son, Tyler. You've always been my son. I just want our family to be whole again." "Family?" I cut her off, my voice sharp. "That family never saw me as part of it, Mom. I sacrificed everything, my dreams, my youth, my very self to save Walker Tech, to make you and Glenn proud. But you chose silence. You chose them, not me." She shook her head, tears falling to the floor. "No, Tyler, that's not true. I love you. I've always loved you, but I made mistakes." I turned away, unwilling to meet her eyes. I didn't want her weakness to sway my resolve. "Mom, I can't help them," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I gave them too much already, and they threw it back in my face. I have nothing left to give." Evelyn stood there, her shoulders shaking with sobs. My heart ached, but I couldn't soften. Not now, not after everything. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. There was one question that had haunted me since the day Glenn revealed I wasn't his son. I turned back, looking straight at my mother. "Mom," I said, my voice low but resolute, "if Glenn isn't my father, then who is?" Evelyn froze, her eyes widening in panic. She stepped back, clutching her handbag as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "Tyler, don't ask that," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It's in the past. You don't need to know." "Don't need to know?" I nearly shouted. "You're telling me I don't need to know who my real father is, after you let me live 35 years in a lie? You owe me the truth, Mom." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stood there, her eyes frantic, as if guarding a secret too heavy to bear. And then, at that moment, the office door swung open. Richard Bennett stepped in, his usual calm and commanding presence intact. He wore a gray suit, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. "Tyler, I came to discuss the Japan contract," he said, but his eyes stopped on Evelyn. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. They looked at each other, silent, but I sensed a strange tension, as if they shared a hidden connection I had never noticed. "Evelyn," Richard said, his voice low, almost gentle. "It's been a long time." Evelyn stepped back, her face pale. "Richard," she whispered, her voice shaking so much I could barely hear her. I looked between them, my heart pounding. Something was wrong, something I didn't know. "Mr. Richard," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "you know my mother?" Richard turned to me, his eyes deep, as if recalling a distant memory. "We knew each other once, but that was a long time ago," he said evenly. My blood ran cold. "Knew each other?" I repeated, looking at my mother. "Mom, what does that mean?" Evelyn shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Tyler, please don't ask," she said, her voice choked. "I'm begging you, don't dig into this." But I couldn't stop. The question of my real father had haunted me too long, and now, with Richard standing here and Evelyn's guilty eyes, I knew the truth was close. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "tell me the truth. Is he—" Evelyn froze, her trembling hands dropping the handbag to the floor. She looked at Richard, then at me, and finally she nodded, tears flowing freely. "Yes," she whispered, "it's true. Richard is your father." It felt like the world collapsed beneath me. Richard, the man who gave me a chance, who believed in me, who I respected like a mentor, was my father. And if that was true, then Emma was my half-sister? The thought struck me like a dagger, piercing my heart. The woman I loved, the woman I planned to marry, was now part of a truth I couldn't accept. Richard frowned, his eyes shifting from Evelyn to me, filled with shock. "Evelyn, what are you saying?" he asked, his voice faltering. "Tyler is my son? Why didn't you ever tell me?" Evelyn sobbed, collapsing into a chair, her hands covering her face. "Richard, I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "Back then, my parents wouldn't let us be together. You were poor with nothing but dreams, and I was pregnant with Tyler. I couldn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't let me go. I married Glenn to hide the truth, to give Tyler a family. Glenn knew, and he agreed to raise Tyler as his own. I thought it would all work out. I'm sorry." Richard stood motionless, his eyes filled with pain and confusion. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, "you kept this from me for 35 years? You let me live without knowing I had a son?" I looked at Richard, then at my mother, my emotions a tangled mess. Joy, pain, anger. I didn't know what I felt. If Richard was my father, I was the rightful heir to the Bennett empire, a legacy I never dared dream of. But it also meant I had lost Emma, the woman I loved more than anything. "Tyler," Richard said, stepping closer, his eyes brimming with emotion. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know you were my son, but if it's true, I want to make it right. I want to be a father to you, even if it's late." I stepped back, shaking my head. "I need time," I said, my voice hoarse. I need to process this." Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the office, leaving Evelyn and Richard behind. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed space, needed time to face the truth that had just exploded. I was Richard Bennett's son, the rightful heir to the Bennett legacy. But that also meant facing a cruel reality. I could never marry Emma, my half-sister. I drove away from the Bennett Walker Industries headquarters, aimless, wanting only to escape. The streets of Newark passed by in a blur, towering buildings, flickering billboards, and hurried crowds, all faded like a painting smudged with water. My mind was consumed by my mother's words, her trembling voice as she admitted that Richard Bennett was my father. And then, Emma's image surfaced, her smile, her gentle eyes, the moments we held hands under the moonlight in Montclair. All of it now felt like a shattered dream. I pulled over on a quiet road near the Passaic River. The water shimmered under the sunset, but I couldn't feel its beauty. All I felt was a black hole in my chest where joy, pain, anger, and confusion swirled into a nameless storm. I was Richard Bennett's son, the man I admired who gave me a chance to rebuild my life. I was the heir to an empire anyone would dream of, but at what cost? Emma, the woman I loved more than anything, the one I had envisioned a future with. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to breathe, but the air felt trapped in my chest. If I accepted this truth, I could have everything: status, power, the recognition I once craved as part of the Walker family. But I would lose Emma. Every time I thought of her, my heart felt like it was being crushed. How could I look at her as a sister when just hours ago I was dreaming of standing with her at the altar, exchanging vows? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my chaotic thoughts. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the answer button, but I stopped. What could he say? That he was sorry for not knowing I was his son? That he'd make it up to me? Or that he just wanted me to return to the office and act like nothing had happened? I didn't want to hear it. Not now. Not while my mind was still reeling. I silenced the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat. But minutes later it buzzed again. This time, it was Emma. Her name on the screen felt like another knife, sharp and painful. I imagined her voice, gentle yet firm, asking where I was, why I'd left. She'd be worried, wanting to know what was wrong, but how could I tell her? How could I look into her eyes and say we couldn't be together, that our love was now forbidden? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just sat there, staring at the river, letting unanswered questions swirl in my mind. Who was I? Tyler Walker, the man who rebuilt his life from ashes? Or Tyler Bennett, heir to an empire I never asked for? Should I be glad to finally know the truth about my father, or devastated by the loss of the woman I loved? I didn't know. Everything inside me was a tangled mess, like a spool of thread torn apart, impossible to unravel. I thought back to my childhood when my mother sang me to sleep, when I believed I was part of the Walker family. I had lived a lie, but at least that lie was simple. Now the truth was more complex, more cruel. I was Richard Bennett's son, but that brought no joy. It only raised a new question. Did I really want this identity if it meant losing Emma? My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Emma. "Tyler, where are you? I'm so worried. Please call me back." I read it, my heart tightening. I wanted to call her, to hear her voice, to let her pull me out of this black hole. But I couldn't. Not when I still didn't know how to face her. I sat there in the car as the sunset faded, giving way to darkness. I didn't know where I'd go next or what I'd do. All I knew was that, for the first time in years, I felt lost again. I was Richard Bennett's son. I was the heir to the Bennett legacy. But I had lost Emma, and perhaps myself, once more. Darkness enveloped Newark as I sat there, gazing at the quietly flowing Passaic River. My phone kept buzzing, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Each time Emma's name appeared on the screen, my heart felt like it was being crushed. The truth, that Richard Bennett was my father, that Emma was my half-sister, that I was the heir to the Bennett legacy, swirled around me like a storm, pulling me into a vortex with no escape. I had thought I'd found myself again, that I'd built a new life from the ashes of the Walker family. But now I was lost once more, unsure of who I was or where I should go. Am I Tyler Walker? Or perhaps Tyler Bennett? I'm the man who saved Walker Tech, who turned Bennett Walker Industries into a tech empire. But I'm also the man who just lost the love of his life, caught between identity and his heart. Should I be glad to finally know the truth about my father? To be given the chance to inherit a powerful family's legacy? Or should I be devastated over Emma, the woman I love, the one I can no longer touch? I thought of my mother, Evelyn, who hid the truth from me for 35 years. Part of me wanted to confront her, to scream and demand why she let me live a lie, why she stayed silent when I needed her most. Should I take revenge, make her feel the pain I endured? But then, recalling her tear-filled eyes in my office, I saw a woman broken, crushed by her own life. Would punishing her ease my heart? Or would it only turn me into another version of the cruelty I'd suffered? I considered leaving, walking away from Newark, from Bennett Walker Industries, from all these people and memories. I could disappear, start over somewhere no one knew me, where I wasn't anyone's son, wasn't burdened by secrets. But deep down, I knew running wasn't how I faced life. I'd run from pain before, and it only made me lose myself for longer. And then I thought of the Bennetts, of Richard, of Emma. Should I go to them, face the truth, even if it tore my heart apart? Face Richard, who didn't know I was his son but believed in me, gave me a chance to prove my worth? Face Emma, the woman I love more than anything, who now could only be a sister? I didn't know if I had the courage to walk through that door, to look into their eyes and accept the truth. I sat there in the darkness, the silent river before me, and I didn't know what to do. I've come so far, from a boy desperate to make his father proud to a man who built an empire with his own hands. But now I stand at a crossroads where every choice carries a cost. What should I do? Walk away without a word, leaving behind all the pain and memories? Seek revenge on my mother to soothe the anger that simmered for years? Or go to the Bennetts, face the truth even if it destroys me? You, those hearing my story, what do you think I should do? I stand here with a broken heart and an uncertain future. Tell me, how should I move forward?